there's this big interview with David Lammy, formerly our colleague here at LBC and, of course, the Shadow Foreign Secretary. And he's defending, during a question and answer session at a right-of-centre think tank in Washington, saying that Donald Trump is misunderstood. And he said that in the event that Labour come to power simultaneously with Trump, which is not outside the realms of possibility by any stretch, they would find common cause in their approach to the world. So bearing in mind both of those things, what I want to know from you is this really smart politics? Because, again, on the newsagents, I was listening to Baroness Chakrabarti talking about this, and she said mass movement democratic politics involves finding common ground with people who, on the surface of it, you fundamentally disagree. And I can see that logically, but I have a tension between head and heart on this. Because in my heart, this feels like a compromise of integrity from Labour. How constructive do you think it is to have lots of opposing views within a political party? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. You can text 84850 or send a comment to us via your Alexa. Well, joining us to discuss this is Femi Oluwole. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, Femi. You famously were let go, dumped by the Labour Party for, what was your crime, Femi?
Because I said I wanted to get electoral reform, a fair voting system, proportional representation, and I said that would also help the other parties, which would then allow Labour to be the head of any coalition government. And simply acknowledging that a fair voting system would help other parties was deemed to be betrayal of the Labour Party.
So you were calling for proportional representation, which lots of people who would fall under that Labour umbrella would also love to see welcomed in. So what was your response when they welcomed Natalie Elphicke with open arms?
Yeah, I found it incredible because 80% of Labour members voted for proportional representation, for a voting system where all votes count equally about 2 years ago. So that is where lefties in the UK are. And yet the Labour Party doesn't find someone like me acceptable for wanting what its members want, but it's willing to welcome with open arms people like Natalie Elphicke, people like Christian Wakeper, people like Dan Poulter. 3 Tory MPs have joined the Labour Party in the last few years, but actually progressive people, nah, you're showing the door.
I mean, Dan Poulter feels different to me because he works in the NHS and because he doesn't have, unlike Natalie Elphicke, a long history of saying things which, like I said in my introduction, would feel more at home in the context of the Reform Party than they would in the Labour Party. Is there in your mind any Rubicon that Labour wouldn't cross? Like, could you see them inviting Nigel Farage into the party, for example?
I think that they've completely abandoned any notion of principle for the sake of gaining a whopping majority at the next election. Because let's be clear, they've spent the last 3 years trying to appeal to Tory voters. That's what they're trying to do, because they think that they can bank progressive votes and say that we've got those, so we can just hope to aim for progressive Tory voters. That's why they've done things like praised Margaret Thatcher on numerous occasions. That's why they've done things like supporting Brexit. That's why they've done things like supporting Israel. That's why Keir Starmer was actually on record as saying some things need to be preserved, and if that sounds conservative, then so be it. He knows that what he's doing is sounding conservative. He's hoping for a huge majority. And the question is, what do we do with that? If we're going to end up with a Labour Party that looks more like the Tory party of old under Cameron, then is that really the change that we need? Or is it going to involve perhaps voting tactically, perhaps voting for who you like the most, and then afterwards really come together to get Labour to do something actually worth the name Labour?
Do you think that they're right, though, that they can take their more traditional voter base for granted because they will likely vote tactically come the next general election? Or do you think there are a growing number of people going, well, this is supposed to be a broad church, and yet we haven't seen, for example, the whip restored to Diane Abbott?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are getting increasingly frustrated with, especially Labour under Keir Starmer's leadership, because it should be a left-leaning party, it should be a progressive party, it should be welcoming people that want to shift things to the left and to work for equality. But it seems that those voices aren't particularly welcome. And so I do think that, especially if you look on TikTok, the absolute outrage from Gen Z as to Keir Starmer's response to Israel and the genocide in Gaza, it's not looking good for him in terms of his long-term support for that demographic.
Femi Oluwole, thank you so much for your time.